What's up, guys? Happy Saturday. Chuck and Jayhawk here to bring you some NBA DFS information. We have a pretty sick football game going on. I hope you played Kareem Hunt and Brevin Jordan. I don't have them together, but played a little bit of both. Pretty fun football game. Hoping for a blowout. Not a blowout. Hoping for the game to go severely under in the second game. But we focus on NBA for now. So, Jayhawk, how we doing today?
Yeah, man, doing great. Great time of year, NFL playoffs, right in the midst of the NBA season. So definitely a great time to be playing DFS.
Yeah, and I think today, so I usually love these Saturday slates, and it's even better when there's NFL on because I don't think people pay attention to late swap as much. Might be a little different since DK, they cut off the night game again for some reason. I don't think we're going to get too much like super good late news that we can take advantage of from Chicago Spurs and the Pelicans and Mavericks, but we have some good plays from those games that we definitely want to get to. We have Steph Curry out. It's a pretty big one. It's projected for, I think it was like 13.5. Let me refresh the model and double check what the spread is there. But I think we're going to want to get to some Warriors players. And what are there any other spots that we should be pretty aware of?
Yeah, Spurs, Warriors, and then yeah, you mentioned the Pelicans. I'm not really sure who's gonna sit or play there. Kind of TBD with CJ and Ingram there.
Okay. And so DeJounte Murray's questionable. Trae Young's probable. If DeJounte's out, I think Trae Young's a pretty good GPP play either way. We're looking at a 6.5 point spread against Washington, which is weird. Kind of makes me lean towards DeJounte being out, but I still don't see how that game is only a 6.5 point spread. Zion is out for rest for the Pelicans. Jaren Jackson Jr. is doubtful. Desmond Bane is out. What else do we got here? Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum are both questionable. It's just Dylan Brooks is in, if that matters. Don't think it really affects much, except maybe we lose out on some Cam Whitmore hurting us again as value. And so pretty interesting slate today. We have some weird chalk. We have some guys who are, to me, are just weirdly low owned. So let's just go ahead and dive into it.
Let's get it.
At the guard position, so to me, Kyrie Irving, 9,700, 10-3. I still think he's a great play. We'll have to see what happens to the spread if maybe Ingram or McCollum is ruled out, but Kyrie's been a fantasy monster recently, and I think we want to get to a lot of him, and then Tim Hardaway Jr. as well at a much more manageable price, 5,800, right in that sweet mid-range spot. Tim Hardaway, double-digit OF index, showing up as, I believe, the second best value. Yeah, second best value on DraftKings after Zaire Williams, so something we definitely want to pay attention to. Of the other top guards, I already mentioned Trae Young, but is there anyone else that you're taking a hard look at?
Yeah, so you mentioned Trey and Kyrie. I'm going to prioritize them in my lineups today. Trey is in a great matchup here against Washington. And Kyrie, man, like he's just been really money, right? Just been 45 plus fantasy points in the past 5 games. And yeah, Tim Hardaway. So I mentioned him. I'm actually in Discord the other day. At 5,300, like on DK, he fits the scoring even better because every 3-pointer worth, another half point. So with only a 500 price bump, like Tim Hardaway, like at 5,300, like you mentioned, I think he looks incredible.
Yeah, we're going to be pretty hard on those two guys. Some of the other guys that are showing up a lot for me, let's just go ahead and sort by value. Zaire Williams. So he's projected for 42 and 46% ownership. And especially with Bane and JJJ out, we talked about on the stream yesterday who's going to handle the ball handling responsibilities. And I said it's probably going to be Zaire Williams, Vince Williams? Is that his name? Yeah, Vince Williams. Didn't realize they have the same last name. And maybe Luke Kennard a little bit. Desmond Bane was going to help out. But without Desmond Bane on the court today, it really... So we have to see if Jacob Gilyard is starting. Because if Jacob Gilyard is starting, he's been out of the rotation. But they need someone to run the offense. And Zaire Williams is a fringe rotation guy right now, I think. He's playing a lot of minutes out of necessity. He's not quite panning out to be what they were hoping he would be. But if Jacob Gilyard is starting, 4.1 over on DraftKings, it's not a bad price for him. If he's not starting, I'm a little bit worried that his ownership would be too high, even though he'd still be an okay play off the bench. But like I said, with people not late swapping and this game starting an hour after lock, he's probably just going to end up... And we have a couple guys in this situation today where if they're not starting, then they're much worse plays than they would have been. But Jacob Gilliard, Luke Kennard, John Conchar pulling 1% ownership. I mean, who's a priority here?
Yeah, Luke Kennard is number one for me. I just think even though he does technically play shooting guard, I think he probably takes more of the ball handling role tonight. Yeah, Gilliard, if he starts, I'm fine with that 4,100. But yeah, like you mentioned, if he does not start, I probably want to be really low on him. And then, yeah, you mentioned Contra at 1%. Like, I feel like I kind of like Contra at 1% rather than playing a 40% owned Gilliard, particularly if he doesn't start Gilliard, that is. So,
Yeah, so with Conchar yesterday, I think he only played a few minutes, but with no Desmond Bain and Conchar played, I think he played 20 minutes the other day when JJJ was out, and it looks like JJJ is not going to play. We know Desmond Bain's out, and so Conchar is going to be a guy. I mean, at 1% versus these 40%, like these other guys definitely have a better chance of getting there, and their minutes are probably more secure. Not Gilliard, but Conchar 1% could be worth taking some shots on, just mixing him into your Memphis exposures. And Power in the chat, you see Levine being a late scratch on the back to back. So it is a thought, but he wasn't listed on the injury report. And so I'm just assuming Zach Levine plays. And I mean, Zach Levine's a guard, right? Let's talk about
yeah,
Chicago.
let's talk.
I mean, I think Zach Levine, his price is decent. I like DeMar a little bit more today from the Chicago guys, but I think Levine is still a pretty decent GPP play. It's kind of weird that Chicago is only 5.5 point favorites against the Spurs when Wembanyama is out today for rest. So we'll have to see there. But I mean, there's just a lot of other guys I want to get to that I'm not really getting to Levine anyway. The guy from the Bulls I'm getting the most of is DeMar. And then just looking at the other guys like Kobe White, I think he's still an okay GPP play, like deep GPP play. If you're playing 150 lineups, his price is still kind of elevated from when those other guys were out. And then I think Caruso was pulling some ownership yesterday. I didn't really understand it. He's only pulling 4% today. I'm not quite sure we're really looking at him, though.
Yeah, so Levine, I think, I don't want to go into center, but Vucevic is one of my favorite center players, particularly from Chicago. And then I think Levine is, perfectly fine. Like you said, mentioned, like I'm not rushing to get to Levine, but he's definitely in a good spot here in the mid range. So I'm definitely fine with it.
Yeah, like I'm getting right around this 13% that the field is over on DraftKings. So it's kind of like I'm not forcing him in, but if he shows up in a couple lineups, I don't mind it.
Yeah.
And then let's see, anyone else from top? I mean, SGA against Orlando. So Orlando to me is a perceived tough matchup. I don't know if the rest of the world realizes how good Orlando's been. But the main thing I'm thinking about SGA is, well, I guess it's a 12-point spread. Actually, didn't realize that. But I think he's an okay GPP play, 12%. I'm probably going to be more on Trae Young, and I'm definitely going to be more on Kyrie Irving. Looking at these other guys, like, I don't know, a lot of these other guys are just guys to me. So from the top end, I think we kind of want to just get to some of these mid-range guys at the guard position. And the one that I'm super interested in is Brandon Pojemski. The 5,600 on FanDuel, 31% ownership. I think that ownership is definitely appropriate. There's no Chris Paul. There's no Steph Curry. We have Corey Joseph projected for 20 minutes. And I think this came up on the stream yesterday about Corey Joseph. And he played. I saw a highlight on Twitter talking about why is this guy in the NBA, because I think he missed the rim on a layup or something. But he played 14 minutes. That was 6 days ago. I don't know what he did yesterday. Let's check it out. But what are we doing with these Golden State guys with Steph out?
Yeah, you mentioned it. Pods definitely a priority on FanDuel in particular. 5,600 just seems way too cheap. I think I got his price right. Yeah, 5,600. And then yeah, I mean, I think we can definitely take stabs at Corey Joseph. I legit haven't watched him play since like COVID. It feels like so. Yeah, assuming he gets rotation minutes, maybe you can consider him. And then obviously Clay and Wiggins, I think, are also in play as mid tier, and like I guess Wiggins is kind of value, but I think those guys are in play as well.
Yeah, it's like I like a lot of pieces from Golden State tonight. Wiggins, Klay Thompson's going to be a part of my exposures. Pods is number one. Dario Saric, we'll get to him when we talk about the centers, but I still like Saric today, assuming he's in the starting lineup. And then you mentioned Kuminga, who's also a forward, but pretty interested in him regardless of if he starts or not. But with Corey Joseph, so we do have him projected for 20 minutes. Played 13 yesterday. There's no Steph, so it's reasonable that he could get up to that 20 minutes. but he's just such a poor fantasy producer, and I don't think that we have that many plays that we're trying to pay up for. And so I actually have 0% Corey Joseph in my exposures right now. Maybe I end up getting a few percent later if I try to force in, I don't know, more SGA, or if I try to get a couple shares of Giannis or something like that. But Corey Joseph, I think you're fine just leaving him on the table.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's probably too risky.
And MD in the chat, do we like Dylan Brooks or Kennard better? So we definitely like Kennard better. Pretty sure you would agree with that, Jayhawk, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And Dylan Brooks, so he's not on a minutes restriction. And looking at the ownership, it's obvious that Kennard is the better play, but like in a vacuum. But Dylan Brooks at zero, projected for 0% ownership on DraftKings, 1% on FanDuel. Against Boston in a 15.5 point spread. I just, a lot of guys I say I don't mind getting a few percent of them, but Dylan Brooks today is not someone I'm really considering at all, especially, and the model agrees, his DK value is in the toilet, his OF index is like the minimum, so I think you're okay avoiding Dylan Brooks today. But while we're on Houston, I mean, Jalen Green was a chalk yesterday. I said I didn't like it. Of course, he went off, so shout out to me. But he's projected for 4% ownership in a much tougher matchup today against Boston. If you take a couple GPP shots on him, I don't think it's the worst. Fred VanVleet under 10%. I believe he was also in the winning lineup last night, put up a 50 ball. Don't mind Fred VanVleet at low ownership. But none of these other guys are really going to show up since Dylan Brooks is back. He doesn't take that much usage, but if he's taking minutes away from some of our value options, namely Cam Whitmore, I just don't think there's any reason to be interested in these guys anymore.
Yeah, and you mentioned the spread is really high, favored towards Boston, so I agree.
Yeah, NBA has been blowout city recently, right? And it's like every single game is projected for double digits, except for the Knicks and Memphis are weirdly close, and then Chicago and Spurs, like I mentioned, was only a 5.5 point spread. I mean, Atlanta versus Washington, it's not a huge spread, but it's yeah, we're looking at 6.5 points. Just I don't know, it doesn't really make sense to me. Washington is bad. Talk about Kuzma when we get to the forwards, but
Yeah.
are there any other mid-range or value guards that you're taking a look at?
Um, I'd love to take a stab on Devin Vassell with no Wimby. The thing is, or do we really need to go there? I just don't think so. So yeah, probably avoid after the guys we mentioned.
Yeah, I took a look at Devin Vassell today. 7,500 on DraftKings. It's not the worst price. The 7K on FanDuel is more reasonable and reflected in the ownership. But yeah, it's not a spot that I'm really getting to today. And then Chris Middleton, 75 and 7,200 in this blowout. If we're playing a few in this projected blowout, if we're playing a few Golden State guys, I don't mind getting to a couple shares of Chris Middleton. Let me put main slate here. So they chopped off the Laker game. Just in case you're playing the late slate, LeBron is not playing tonight. So opens up some opportunities for the Lakers. But if you have questions about that, hop into Discord. I haven't really dived into the night slate yet. One guy I wanted to ask you about, Damian Lillard, projected for 12 and 13% in this perceived blowout. Are we playing him at all? Are we considering him pretty hard?
Yeah, man. I think the last game he played, he was on his way to crush his price point at 8,500. Obviously, the game did blow out. Didn't get that full minute ceiling there, but yeah, I think at 85 is he 85. I think he makes great GPP, makes for a great GPP play here against Golden State.
And the last guard I want to mention before we move on is Jaden Hardy. So last time this happened, a couple days ago, we were talking about Jaden Hardy 100%. And then Jason Kidd changed up the starting lineup, and he didn't start, which is super annoying. Off the bench at his price that he was last time, I still had close to 100% of him. I think I had 100%. Played 23 minutes, but he had a really good first rotation. I don't know if he had a single stat in the second half, though. Maybe he had a rebound or something, but he did not close. It doesn't look like Jason Kidd fully trusts him yet, like we were hoping that maybe he does. He still put up the 21 fantasy points at that 3,700 price. Now he's 4,600. Are you playing Jaden Hardy today?
If he was starting, I would be very inclined to get to him. But assuming THJ starts once again, probably not too much Hardy for me.
Yeah, I'm looking at my exposures right now, and he's projected for 12%, 23 minutes. I think that's a reasonable projection. I'm not even getting 20% of him in my exposures, though. I'm right around the field, which I think is appropriate. There's still a chance he comes in, and because those short minutes he got, he went off. It's a tight spread, one of the tighter we have on the slate, and so we're not going to count on any kind of blowout run for him here. But I don't know. I guess the priorities from Dallas are Kyrie Irving and Tim Hardaway to me. And then if you want to mix in some Jaden Hardy, I think that's okay.
Yeah, for sure.
I just want to mention Pods again. I think he's got to be one of the best plays that's coming in under 10% owned on DraftKings, 6,400. The 5,600 on FanDuel, 31% ownership. I feel like that should be 60. We know that he's a great fantasy producer. If this game blows out, are they just going to play Corey Joseph for the whole fourth quarter? I don't think so. I mean, Pods is still a rookie. They still have incentive to develop him, and he's a part of the rotation. And so maybe the game stays close and he just plays 40 minutes today. We haven't really seen this situation with Steph and Chris Paul out before, so we'll have to see what they do. But I think Pods is just a phenomenal play. Kind of feel like about him like I did about Jalen Johnson yesterday. And transitioning into forwards, speaking of Jalen Johnson, our boy is fourth in value, and his OF index, he's third behind Giannis and Jason Tatum. He's ahead of Julius Randle, Paolo Banchero, Brandon Ingram, Jaylen Brown, like stars in this league. And Jalen Johnson projected for 12 and 17%. I know he kind of disappointed yesterday. He has a cake matchup against Washington in what's supposed to be a tight game. And so Jalen Johnson, my other like top low owned play. What do we feel about him?
Yeah, man, I'm right on with you. I have absolutely loved Jalen Johnson ever since he came in the league. Just price point 7.2 seems like a lot, but man, he's been very steady. 35 plus and fancy points in most of his games. And then if we get no Murray, like him and Young should just dominate the usage tonight for Atlanta. So yeah, love him either way, but really would like him if DeJounte Murray was ruled out.
Yeah, and it's like, so yesterday he put up 29 fantasy points in 32 minutes. The game before he put up 64. He had a stretch where he was putting up 40 plus every night. But, maybe it's a little risky. It's probably why his ownership is low, but I'm probably going to end up playing like 50% of Jalen Johnson in my DraftKings lineups tonight. And then over on FanDuel, he's pulling a little bit more ownership at the higher price. Still just want to take shots on him there. He gets the extra point for steals and blocks. So my two top GPP plays today, Pajemski and Jalen Johnson. But looking at the rest of the forwards, I mean, Giannis stands out above the rest in terms of OF index, of course. We have him projected for 36 minutes. Now, it's almost 15-point spread. We are in blowout territory. We have some okay value. I feel like I'm kind of living more in the mid-range today, but how much Giannis are you trying to get to?
Yeah, so Giannis, I'm actually not getting to as much. He's in a fantastic matchup here against Golden State. No one's questioning that. It's just more of, um, we have some value, but not like any 3K guys. So, like, I don't know. I think he's still fine. You can get up to him, but I prefer the Trays and the Kyries if I'm spending up.
I think I agree, and we'll take a look at the value in a moment. But I'm right around the field on Giannis right now, so I am playing him a little bit. But I mean, so just thinking about it, if this game stays close, Giannis should destroy this team, right? There's no Draymond, there's no Steph. He's going up against Dario Saric and Kevon Looney most likely. It's a great spot for Giannis. This 33% on FanDuel at 12K. I have to say I disagree with it. I think Giannis is a good candidate to get to that 5x value, but I don't know. Maybe 60 fantasy points from Giannis could be enough today, but if he loses that last fourth quarter rotation, it's really going to hurt him. So something to, blowout in Milwaukee. It's pretty likely, and you guys know I hate to project blowouts, but when it gets to 14.5 points, yeah, we are firmly in a probable blowout territory. Some of these other top guys, though, Julius, Paolo, Brandon Ingram, if he plays, Kristaps Porzingis, and I mentioned I really like DeMar as a GPP play. From these other guys, who are you most interested in?
Yeah, so I think Banchero's ownership's a little bit interesting. Coming off a pretty bad game for Banchero's standards, but it's not a great matchup against OKC, not an awful one. I think he makes sense as a fine tournament play. And then I hate saying, but Chris Middleton, like we could probably take stabs at low ownership if we're not getting to Giannis or Dame. Chris maybe could be the guy that causes the blowout. Probably not likely, but I think he's in play. And then you mentioned DeMar earlier. DeMar probably the quote unquote safest play from Chicago. But other than that, and then Kyle Kuzma. We'll get into Kuzma. I really like Kuzma. In addition to Jalen Johnson in that game environment.
So I don't know if maybe I misread the ownership earlier, but I thought Kuzma was coming in for crazy ownership, and so I was trying to avoid him. But under 10%, I don't mind taking some shots on him, especially Like, how often do we get a Washington game with a spread in the single digits? Can't imagine it's happened too many times this season. But that's a decent GPP shout. And then I'm glad what you mentioned about Chris Middleton, where we shouldn't really fear players in blowout games if it's the team doing the blowing out, right? Like, if Milwaukee blows out Golden State, Chris Middleton probably had a good game. Giannis probably had a good game. Damian Lillard probably had a good game, right? Like, one or two of them probably had really good games to get there. And either way, I mean, Chris Middleton at 4% on DraftKings, I know his price is slightly uncomfortable, and I still would rather just save 200 and play DeMar. But if you mix in a little Chris Middleton, I don't mind it. And we talked up Jalen Williams last time, went off in 3 quarters. He's projected for 6% ownership on both sites. The 7,900 on FanDuel, it's a little uncomfortable. If you want to take a couple shots in your exposures, I don't mind that. The 7,200 price on DraftKings, though, it's awkward because he's basically the same price as Jalen Johnson, and I much prefer Jalen Johnson, even at twice the ownership. But I still don't mind taking shots on Jalen Williams. This 12-point spread, it's kind of surprising to me. I mean, Orlando's pretty decimated right now, but they're coached so well, and they play team ball. And OKC is good. I mean, we just saw them beat Portland by like 100, so blowout is definitely a worry. But at 6%, I'll take some shots on Jalen Williams again.
Yeah, not as good as a matchup as he had against Portland last game, but yet I think he's still firmly in playing tournaments, so right there with you.
And top of the DK value, Dario Saric. And so he's projected for 60 and 52% ownership. He came in wildly under owned yesterday after he was inserted into the starting lineup kind of late. And I actually missed that myself. I just read the first few guys, and I didn't even pay attention to who was starting at center because I didn't think it was going to be Saric. But we have him projected for 25 minutes. Now, yeah, we're slightly worried about the blowout, Golden State, Milwaukee, but he's only projected for 25 minutes. It's definitely bad if he loses that fourth quarter rotation, but when guys are projected under 30 minutes anyway, I'm not as worried about playing them when their team's possibly going to get blown out. Because, I mean, if it's like a 20-point game going into the fourth quarter, maybe Steve Kerr will put him out for a couple minutes, try to come back. But if it's any more than that, then it's probably just going to be Trace Jackson Davis. But Dario Saric, maybe the ownership seems a little bit high, but I don't mind it that much. I guess I mind it a little bit, but I'm playing a bunch of them, so...
Yeah, so I actually last night I was lucky. I had saved a 2 player pivot, and I did end up getting to a bunch of Sarge. It came in extremely underowned due to the late news, but yeah, I think even in 25 minutes here, even if it does blow up, should be able to get around 5 times value. So I'm fine with him. I just am a little bit hesitant at 60% ownership on this big of a slate.
Yeah, I mean, he played 28 minutes last night in a tight game. Golden State ended up winning, put up a really good fantasy score. He had a lot of he so in his like first rotation, he was already up to almost 20 fantasy points. And so he's a great fantasy producer, fantasy points per minute. And we saw his minutes were down for a bit, but if he is starting tonight, I'm okay with the ownership. If he's coming off the bench, like I mentioned earlier, like this game starts an hour after lock, people are on. This is a thing. Like on days that there's NFL, especially today, people just aren't paying attention enough to swap as optimally as they should. And so if Dario is not starting, I still think he's a good play. But the problem is he's probably going to come in well over owned, and so it's just something to pay attention to. So we'll see. I don't think we're going to get that news before lock, but definitely you have to be on your phone with notifications on if you are playing today's slate.
Yeah, and I'm personally fading the first game. I think it's Boston, Houston. I don't really see anyone that's like a must from that game. Maybe get to Tatum or Brown or Chris Hodge, but for me, I don't see anyone. So I'll probably just wait for that news to come out.
Yeah, I'm pretty much fading that first game too. I have 3% of Tatum and I have 3% of Fred VanVleet, but I might try to get a few percent of Porzingis, but I don't think there's anyone in this game where if we miss out on them, sure, someone could go off and, maybe you're sitting there like, oh, these guys are all low owned. I need this guy in my lineup. But I think there's enough other good plays on the slate tonight and these guys are going to be so low owned anyway that unless someone hits that nut combo, it shouldn't really burn you. So I like that a lot. Just saving your exposures because the second game is Atlanta, Washington. That starts a half hour after lock. And then all the other games start an hour after lock or an hour and a half after lock. So we should have that news by the time Washington, Atlanta starts, hopefully. Because we are interested in some of these Washington, Atlanta guys, like we mentioned. Jalen Johnson, number one. If DeJounte's out, I think we're going to be really interested in Trae Young. And then Kyle Kuzma as a GPP play. I mean, Tyus Jones, who we didn't mention with the guards, I think he's fine at 6,100 on DraftKings. Denny Avdia is off and on. This guy's been a tournament winner a few times at this 1 or 2% ownership he's coming in at. So there's a few pieces from that game we're interested in. But yeah, I really like saving our exposures for the later games.
Oh yeah, one more guy I forgot to mention at guard. I think if Dejounte Murray's out, maybe Bogdanovich we could look to as
Mm-hmm.
well. I don't know what his price is, but if he's cheap enough, I think he's definitely in play if Murray's out.
Yeah, so this guy was on a tear for a bit, and his price got up insane. It was over 7K. Yeah, 7K. I thought it was up there for a little bit longer, but so he's been in the 6K range most of the season. If DeJounte's out, I don't know that Bogdanovich is going to start, but he should still play 30 minutes, which is good. He'll get some of the minutes when Trae is off the court, but whether or not he starts, Bogdanovich is going to be a pretty strong play. Let's see what the OF index says. So the model doesn't love him right now. That's with DeJounte in. We have him projected for 27 minutes, 4% ownership. I imagine these numbers are all going to go up if we get that DeJounte news. So I like that call. And then yesterday we talked about Sadiq Bey also. Sadiq Bey, 5,758. I think he's a fine GPP play now. Even better if DeJounte is ruled out as well.
Yep, agreed.
Who's going to be the starting five for Atlanta? So I don't know if Bogdanovich is going to start. We've seen it a couple times. Like he has started sometimes in these situations. Other times they brought him off the bench. I'm not sure what they're going to do. I mean, they could throw Trent Forrest out as kind of like a dummy starter. Don't expect him for big minutes, even if he starts. But, I mean, 3,500, he played, 20 minutes yesterday? Put up a decent fantasy score. So this wouldn't be an awful value spot. And especially if he's starting, it's probably going to go overlooked by the field. I don't think we should expect a lot, but it is an option for under 4K.
Yeah, I assume they usually throw in like a Forrest you mentioned, and Boggy usually comes in and most of the time closes if he's playing good, but
Mm-hmm.
in the first half. So I definitely think he plays heavy minutes even if he doesn't start.
If Sarge doesn't start, does he get blowout run? No, he won't. I imagine that they're going to give it to Trace Jackson Davis in that case. Now, so you guys know I hate building for blowout. 14 points, we're in blowout territory. Don't play Trace Jackson Davis just because you think he's going to get the blowout run. I want these guys to have a chance to get there before the blowout. Now, he's been a great fantasy producer. I mean, 17 minutes yesterday, 28 fantasy points. Is he center only today? Yeah, he's center only today. So were there any other forwards you want to talk about before we move into center?
I think we got all of them. I mean, Boggy and Bay we covered. So yeah, I think we got all of them.
I'm just trying to make sure. I mean, Vince Williams disappointed yesterday. I think his price is probably appropriate. Not sure that he has that ceiling, but maybe with Bane out, I don't know. Maybe he tries and steps it up, plays for his contract next year. But we pretty much touched on everyone. I mean, Chuma Okeke is kind of interesting, more so on FanDuel at 4,300 to 4,700 on DraftKings. I think we have enough other plays. We don't really have to get there. And then I don't know how many times I mentioned Paolo Banchero against OKC. Yeah, this is a big spread, and he's actually projected for kind of weirdly high ownership, but I don't mind him taking some GPP shots on him. Oh, and David Roddy. Sorry, I saw your comment. I was waiting till we got to forwards to talk about David Roddy. I think he's fine. 15% and 25% ownership. Like the 25 on FanDuel, it might seem high, but he's 3,800, and he allows us to fit in a couple of these other high mid-range guys. So I don't mind it. 4,200 on DraftKings. Yeah, I don't mind it. Where are you at on David Roddy?
Yeah, obviously the starters are going to be really key for Memphis here. But if Zaire doesn't start and he's still really high owned, I think Roddy's probably my pivot there in terms of ownership. So I like him. Just kind of wait on the starting lineup, see what's going on, and then yeah, that's probably how I would got it.
And another guy, Gregory Jackson. I have no idea who this is. Projected for 9% ownership on DraftKings at the flat minimum price. And I was getting him in some of my lineups. Just he's projected for 11 minutes, flat min on both sites. Do you have any idea who this player is?
Did he play in the G League, or am I like?
I have
I
to
have no
assume.
idea.
I have to assume that he did, right?
Yeah.
GG Jackson.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I remember him from college. Um,
Yeah, went to.
South Carolina, right?
Yeah, good call.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just
exactly. So
I remembered him from there. I don't know why. It's just good.
So he played 12 minutes yesterday against the Clippers, put up 4 points, 5 rebounds, and an assist. I mean, 9% seems kind of weird for a guy who's probably not an NBA level player, but if that 3K allows you to do other stuff with your lineup, it's probably not the worst. It's probably not the worst value guy to throw in. I mean, this 10.5 point spread is kind of weirdly close as well, with Memphis so decimated and Knicks kind of on a roll right now. So don't mind getting to these pivots here.
I assume he should be the backup five to Tillman, correct?
I feel like they don't. Yeah, they cut Biombo, and I wonder if
Yes.
they're regretting that right now. So we'll have to see what they end up doing. But speaking of Tillman, good transition into center. Xavier Tillman, 24% on DraftKings, 25% on FanDuel at 54 and 5,800. He had a really good game yesterday, and there's no Biombo anymore. There's probably not going to be JJJ today, and so Xavier Tillman at 5,400 is definitely an incorrect price. Played 31 minutes yesterday, played 28 in the previous game after it's so weird that he was just out of the rotation for like a week or two. But this is probably the best center play on the slate. Price, considering the price.
Yeah, most definitely right. And Gigi Jackson, we just mentioned him. I don't think Memphis really wants to run him out there that much if they don't have to. So, assuming Tillman's playing the vast majority of the minutes, I really like him here.
Yeah, so Saric is my highest exposed center right now. Tillman is second, and I'm getting a lot of ownership to those guys. Vooch is third, but after that, everyone just falls off a cliff. I'm getting like 10% of a couple guys, 5% of Brook Lopez, stuff like that. And so, at our center spot today, I think we really want to focus on Saric, Tillman, Vooch. Vooch is just too cheap. He's kind of disappointing yesterday, but. And I know it's kind of awkward. I don't like playing these cheap centers over on FanDuel, but when they do have, like, Xavier Tillman does have a ceiling-ish, and at 5,800, I don't mind getting to him over on FanDuel. There's not that many strong center plays today.
Yeah, right there with you.
And Courtney A. Parker in the chat, Mo Wagner. Not really a guy I was considering today. He's projected for 3% ownership. The thing is, he doesn't really get the blowout run. I don't know if maybe there's someone else not showing up on the model projected for less than 10 minutes right now, another big man on the roster. But Mo Wagner is just, his chances of getting there during the regular time to me are pretty low. And then if he's not going to get the blowout run, I'm just not even considering him today.
Yeah, not in consideration for me either.
And Goga, 5,500 at 1%. We've seen Goga at 5,500 be like 40% owned, and he went off. Now, OKC is a tough matchup. Chet Holmgren is good on defense. So, I'd rather play Goga than Mo Wagner. At least we know Goga's starting, projected for basically the same minutes, but I'm not really going to get to either of these guys. The only guy from Orlando I'm interested in is Paolo Banchero.
Yeah, right there with you.
Sort by OF index again. Giannis, not even close. A lot of the time, I'd prefer to only play him in a power forward spot, but because we lack really good center value today, or just really good center plays, I guess, I don't mind playing him in the center spot. Like I said, I'm playing a lot of Saric, who's also power forward eligible, and Xavier Tillman. So don't mind Giannis and Julius Randle in the center spot either. 8,900, he's projected for 15 and 17%. Like Julius, like taking shot. Chet, 1%? You think this is incorrect?
I don't love the spot here against Orlando, but at 1%, man, yeah, I think that's probably too low tonight. Especially, we have a couple solid center plays, but I think he's always in play, right, in tournaments.
Yeah, he's got to be at 1%. So Orlando, like Goga, is weirdly good on defense, and so Orlando isn't exactly a team we target centers against. But when Chet Holmgren is 1% owned, it is getting close to blowout territory. So I get why he's 1% owned. But if I show up with a couple shares of him, I don't mind it. And Courtney in the chat, why don't I like playing cheap centers on FanDuel? So point guard and center are the two positions who typically score the most fantasy points. And over on FanDuel, let's say Vooch puts up like 45 fantasy points today, or just like a good fantasy score, I guess. Unless you nail every other position, if you play a cheap center, even if he goes for a 5, 6x, you're going to be so far behind the field that's going to be really difficult to catch up. And so I mentioned Tillman. I think Tillman's fine, but I don't think that there's any cheaper centers I'd get to on FanDuel. Saric, 4,800. He's power forward eligible. I would play him in the power forward spot. Kevon Looney, 4,300. I don't know. I would probably avoid it, although the model is saying that he's a pretty decent value. But the point is, just centers typically put up good fantasy scores, and what do we have? A 7-game slate. There's 14 starting centers. And so I prefer to at least be in the mid range at center, but there's situations where a cheap center can work.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then I also wanted to talk about obviously Wemby's out for San Antonio. Do you project one of Barlow or Sandro to start for San Antonio, and how do you like those guys?
So I think, let me see what Underdog has, because my first instinct was, yeah. So they have Barlow in the starting lineup right now. Trey Jones, Devin Vassell, Julian Champagny, Jeremy Sochan, and Dominic Barlow. Like, what a lineup, man. You have Keldon Johnson, start him. I don't understand it. I hope they trade him. He deserves better. But yeah, so they're projecting Dominic Barlow to start. I kind of think he starts too. And if you've been watching the stream this week, we were on him when he's been coming in for sub 5% ownership. He's coming in for 2% ownership on DraftKings today. Both of them are. But this 4,500 price, I don't know. I think if he was under 4K, I'd be all about it. But now that he's above 4,500, it's just a little bit harder for him to return really good value. Now, he played 17 yesterday, played 24 and 22 the 2 games before that. We have him projected for 24. And so him projected for 24 minutes in the model, he's not showing up as like an outstanding value. Sandro is actually showing up as a much better value on both sites with less minutes. Like he's much cheaper on FanDuel, only slightly cheaper on DraftKings. And so I don't mind taking shots on Barlow, but I'm not going to be 10x the field like I have been the last couple of slates. What about you?
Yeah, man, really tough to decide for these two. I agree. Barlow should start here. I think he's probably the safer option between the two, except Sandro, I think, has a way bigger ceiling. Sandro, obviously, really good fantasy producer. So if Sandro, for some reason, would start, I would really like Sandro. But yeah, I like Barlow, but I agree. His price at 4,500 does seem a little bit steep here, but I still like him. I'm considering him for single entry as my second center on DraftKings. So I think they're both firmly in play.
And so, Courtney, back to your like cheap center question. Dominic Barlow, I guess he's power forward only, so we didn't have to worry about it. I was gonna say, I mean, the 4,900 price on FanDuel, it's a little more than I'd like to pay, but he does get stocks, and we know how valuable those are over on FanDuel. So I don't know, not the worst, but center eligible only on DraftKings. We can play 2. There's not a lot of centers I'm dying to play tonight, and Dario has power forward eligibility, like we mentioned. So I don't mind taking shots on these guys at low ownership. It's just someone has to play the center minutes, right? And they don't really have another big man on the roster. With Victor out, Zach Collins is out, Charles Bassey's lost for the season. I mean, they're not going to run Keldon at center. They're not going to run Sochan at center. I mean, Sochan center? I don't know. Guy plays 5 positions. Who knows? But, but and so the thing is, one of them probably is going to be on the court for most of the game. I don't even know if they have another guy on the roster that could even get out there. But especially, I don't know how much it affects these guys, but Doug McDermott is not playing today. And so it could be more minutes. We didn't mention Chetty, and we didn't really talk about the Spurs at all. But these guys are coming in for super low ownership. And like I said, it's only a 5-point spread, which is weirdly low. And so I don't mind taking shots on some of these Spurs, all coming in for very low ownership. If you get just a sprinkling of them, seems fine, right?
Yeah, someone's going to go off here from the Spurs besides the centers, in my opinion. It's just on this slate, it's going to be, we don't really want to like take guesses. I mean, we can, but with other solid plays, it's going to be tough to really be like, okay, like I want to play 100% of this guy from the Spurs, you know?
Yeah, none of these guys are projected for over 30 minutes except for Devin Vassell, projected for 33 and a half. I guess Trey Jones at 31, but I don't trust Trey Jones' minutes right now. And at this price, it's not a guy I'm really even considering today. Sochan is Diao. I think Sochan's a little bit better of like a point guard than Diao, but I get the comparison. I like that. I haven't heard that before.
Man, that's an old name, isn't it, Boris Dio? I've heard that name forever.
Dude, he got traded for Joe Johnson one time, which is insane. Joe Johnson was really good at basketball. But some of the other centers, I mean, our model darling center, Brook Lopez, still third in value, coming in at 3 and 2%. I guess I'm just going to keep losing money on this guy every day. I mean, Golden State probably has a center out most of the game. They don't have Draymond. Maybe they run Kuminga at center when Bobby Portis is on the court. But if Brook Lopez is on the court, he's going to be going up against the center. I mean, he's projected for 32 minutes. Obviously, blowout risk. We've been talking about it, but I still think he's a fine center play on a day where, other than Tillman and Sarge, I don't think there's clear centers that we really want to play. It's kind of worrying that Vooch is so cheap and his DK value is a little bit lower on the list than these other guys. But what other centers are you considering or getting to today?
Yeah, so I would love to get to one of Randall or Hardenstein. I just like it with so many other good centers. Really tough for me to get there. Would like Randall a lot more if Brunson was ruled out. Don't know if we have that news yet, but he was questionable. But yeah, other you mentioned it, Vooch, I really like at his price point in matchup. Obviously no Wemby there for San Antonio. And then yeah, that's pretty much you mentioned Sarge, you mentioned TJD. Those are kind of the guys I was all looking at.
Is Draymond back? No, Draymond is not back yet. Their projected starting lineup is the same as yesterday, except Brandon Pajemski starting at the point guard instead of Steph Curry. Pods, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, Dario Saric, Kevon Looney. And so, I mean, Steve Kerr's changing it up like every day. So I don't know what this guy's doing. So if that's the starting lineup, I think they're all fine plays. Probably don't want to play Saric and Kevon Looney in the same lineup together, even though it's obvious they're going to be sharing the court for a few minutes. But again, Kevon Looney is a pretty decent pivot to Saric coming in at much lower ownership, and I don't have them, points per dollar. I don't have them projected that much differently, and the model difference isn't that much either. Like Kevon Looney still projects as a really good value, especially over on DraftKings. At 1/3 of the ownership. Now, Saric is a better fantasy producer. I think he's a better play, but we've seen these situations where the pivot just does really well. And if they're both starting, I think they're fine. Trace Jackson Davis, though, at 0%. I think you were talking about Trace Jackson Davis earlier. Do you want to mention your thoughts on him one more time?
Yeah, so you mentioned we want him to get to value before the blowout. I just think he should get, some run even in the when the game's close, but with blowout, like he will really clean in those minutes. So if you're playing one or 20 lineups, still prefer Sarge, but if you're 115, I definitely don't mind pivoting to some TJD there.
And the Prince in the chat, no Capella love. So this is a guy, he was in my dummy when I was just scrolling through entering my lineups earlier. And I was kind of surprised that when I ran lineups, I really wasn't getting him as much as I expected to. Because we like centers against Washington, right? Now, he's not exactly the guy that you give the ball to and he's just going to bang down low. A lot of his points are going to come from lobs from Trae Young or DeJounte or like put back layups, like easy buckets, stuff like that. And so he doesn't fit the archetype of the center that's going to crush Washington. But 6,300 on DraftKings at 13% ownership, I think he's a good GPP play still. And then you mentioned, Jayhawk, you mentioned Hartenstein earlier, and I was kind of surprised I wasn't getting him either because I have him projected pretty well. He's a little bit lower on the model, but 6,600 on DraftKings at under 10% ownership, I think he's a pretty fine GPP play too.
Yeah. He dealt with a little bit of foul trouble last game, so I think that cut into his minute ceiling. But yeah, I mean, at 6,600, pretty much the same price as he was the last slate he was on. So definitely fine with taking stops there.
Any other centers that maybe we missed or that you want to mention before we build a quick dummy and get out of here?
I think we covered everyone. I'm not interested in any Sengun tonight against Boston in that spread. So yeah,
It's
I would
weird,
love to.
right? Yeah. I mean, he just has such a low value score. Like Sengun to me is usually always in play, but yeah, Boston. And I don't care about matchups as much as maybe I should, but this is a matchup that makes sense to get away from Sengun. But I mean, 6 and 5%. If he shows up in a couple percent of my lineups, I'm gonna be okay with it.
Yeah.
And let's go ahead and start out building our dummy. Who are the first two guys in? Is it the Kyrie and Tim Hardaway?
Yep. I think those guys for sure.
All right. Dallas is the last game. When does Dallas play? Okay, I'm going to just go ahead and throw Kyrie in the guard spot, and I'm going to throw Tim Hardaway in the forward spot. After this, is it Saric? Is that the next guy in, or Tillman, maybe?
Sarge and Tillman, we can go. I like both those guys a ton.
All right, let's play both of these guys.
Might be too much talk. We need to get different on spots now.
Oh, well, we have, so Pods is my favorite play.
Okay.
My favorite guard play on the slate. He's coming in for low ownership. I wouldn't be surprised if he came in lower than the model was projecting, though, or higher than the model. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he came in higher than the model was projecting. And then it looks like we're going to have to play Jalen Johnson in the utility spot. So looks like there's a lot of forwards that we want to get to today, which is great. We have 5,300 left for shooting guard, small forward. Let's see who the model likes the most, if we can find a low-owned guy showing up. I mean, so it's probably going to be, man, are we just going to go with two Memphis guys?
Yeah, I hate to say it, but like most likely, I think Kennard probably safe is one.
Yeah, let's throw Kennard in there. Kennard 5K leaves us 5,600. I mean, let's just put in Vince Williams pretty easily. We could put in Zaire Williams and maybe upgrade one of the other spots, but who else is at 5,600 small forward? Yeah, I mean, Vince Williams, it's like I think he lacks the ceiling, but I think he's okay for the price. Let's put Tim Hardaway in small forward and see if maybe there's a power forward. Well, not Vince Williams, Tim Hardaway.
There we go.
Power forward spot, Vince Williams. Courtney's shout, Mo Wagner. Bobby Portis put up like a super nuke game yesterday, 2 days ago. 49 fantasy points. Like, this guy just randomly does it. He doesn't get this. Well, I guess he kind of did get the super blowout run in that game, though, didn't he? Against Boston.
I think he got the entire third quarter. So that was crazy to me. Did he get in the fourth quarter too?
I don't think so. Just looking at this 22 minutes played, but I mean, over 2 fantasy points a minute. Come on.
Yeah, that in the first half, I was watching the game. He legit, I felt like he hit every single 3-pointer he put up. So,
right. I'm gonna throw Jalen Johnson to forward to see if there's like a clear last play that we want to get in. But I think these are all good plays. Maybe if you want to mix up Kennard with Zaire Williams, that's fine. I think Kennard's a really good play though. But Irving, Hardaway, Pods, Tillman, Saric, and Jalen Johnson. Like, my core is a little bit larger than normal today. I'm going to be very heavy on all these guys and just mix everyone else in. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really change anything. I mean, Trace Jackson Davis, 5,600. I want to try something here. Does Pods have shooting guard eligibility? Then we'll get out of here in just a minute. So Pods shooting guard eligibility. I want to try this with Jacob Gilliard and see if it opens up another kind of build for us. So Pajemski, how expensive is he? 6,500 for utility. Allows us to get to Denny Avdia, Trey Jones, who I don't love. Don't mind Jabari Smith. No one's going to play him. If you have a couple percent, that seems fine. Bogdanovich, though, seems like the play if DeJounte is out. So kind of like that a lot. And so,
like that as well.
Yeah, we have some really good chalk I think we can eat. And then we have a couple of really good low-end plays in Jalen Johnson and Pajemski. I mean, this lineup, it's probably not live in like a big GPP just because there's probably going to be a random low-owned guy that goes off besides these guys. But if you're playing like small field stuff, then this is a really strong core. So
yeah. One more thing I just wanted to note real quick. I know you got Discord, so you need to get out of here. But if you're playing more than 2 Golden State guys, let's say you're running, you add Wiggins to that lineup, probably want to run it back with one of Dame, Giannis, or Middleton, correct?
So just thinking about it, yeah, I would like that. If there was a way to like just boost the Milwaukee guys rather than force one in, then I think I'd like that more. It's just that these Golden State guys are so cheap that it doesn't take a lot for them to get there, while the main Milwaukee guys that we're interested in are kind of expensive, Dame, Chris Middleton, and Giannis. And so if I was running like 3 Golden State guys, then maybe I would set that rule. But with 2, I think it's okay to run just 2 by themselves since they are all so cheap. It doesn't take much for them to get there.
Yeah. No, I agree. I was just saying 3 or more. Yeah, 2 definitely I'm fine with going. Just Golden State.
What is Brandon P's ownership? Right now, we have projected for 9%, 31% over on FanDuel, and I think they're both too low, to be honest. We haven't projected for 34 minutes. It's a really good fantasy producer. 1 fantasy point per minute is 34 fantasy points on DraftKings. We're happy with it. On FanDuel, that's just, you have to have him if you want to win a GPP tonight. And then, so small forward and power forward are the 3rd highest scoring spots. I haven't really checked into it. I imagine power forward is number 3, but it's just point guards have the ball in their hands and centers play around the rim. But those are the 2, to me, the 2 positions that are most important. And I guess I would say I typically find myself finding good value plays at power forward, just because power forwards also kind of play near the rim most of the time too. So appreciate you guys watching. I'll be in the Discord in about 4 minutes. Instructions in the description below. And, go football today. We'll see what happens. I have no idea what happened in this game. So good luck to us. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Good luck.